go get some beautiful succulents. Let's see if I can capture this little guy. Look at him. He's just chilling on me. So now I'm frozen like this. He's been hanging out on me for a while now. He's still on me. What do I do? Please don't go up my shirt. Please don't go in my shorts. So a lot of people end up finding little leaves and they have babies on the edge. This is what I mean. So sometimes you find a succulent leaf and it has babies at the end. Oh, it's not wanting to focus. Kind of, huh? There you go. You see the roots right there? All right, so today I'm going to talk about baby succulents with leaves. So if you want to learn how to propagate by leaves, continue watching. So I'm going to show you with this plant I have here. This one has been beheaded. Usually when you behead a succulent, you cut it and then around the stem it'll begin to grow babies. So here's one. When I say you cut the mama off and then you start to grow babies. So this one I cut the mama off and look, there's already a baby growing. This one got the mama cut off too and there's a baby growing. There's actually another little one growing on the other side right there. So if you behead this type of succulent, a lot of succulents do this. If you behead, beheading meaning you cut the succulent right about there, and then you take this one and repot it or do whatever you want. But when you behead succulents, you get more succulents. So see this one? I beheaded this one and now I got two. A lot of these guys have babies growing. And this one, I beheaded the mom and look at how many are growing. There's 1, 2, 3, it looks like, growing from there. So I normally cut these succulents off and I use for arrangements. That's why I behead a lot of my plants. So here, on this one I could show you a little bit easier. So on this one, you would cut right about here. You cut right about there, and then the stem will continue to grow babies off of it. So even though you're not going to have this mama plant on there because you're going to use it for something else or whatever the reasoning is, you're going to end up growing more babies on the stem. Normally I like to behead my succulents around springtime. I go through and do it to all the succulents, whether I'm going to use them in an arrangement or not, just so I can end up getting more babies, so growing more babies on them. So these guys are one of the easier ones to propagate by leaves. That's why I like to show off how to do it on these guys. So I'm going to take the leaves off of this guy off so I can begin to grow some babies. So when people say clean break means when you pull the leaf off, you're not going to break the leaf. You're going to take it exactly right from off where the stem is. So you're going to twist it a little bit, and this is going to be a clean break. So the leaf is not damaged at all, and sometimes it even brings a little bit of the stem with it, which is really good. That means you took off a leaf with a clean break. So when I have plants that I've beheaded, I like to take a lot of the leaves off because anyway, it's not it doesn't have the mother plant like this one. It doesn't have the mother plant anymore. So instead of just keeping it like that, I just pluck these guys off, throw them back in there, and forget about them. A lot of people start growing babies and they're like, oh my gosh, what did I do with the babies? Nothing, don't worry. All you got to do is set it back in wherever you got it from and let it continue to grow. So here, I had left some leaves in here a while back, and look at this guy's already growing some roots. You just leave them in there and just forget about them. And here is one. Let me see if I can get it without breaking the leaf. So here's one that I threw in there a couple weeks back, and it's already got roots and a baby growing from there. You just toss them back in there and let them keep growing. When you do do leaf propagation, make sure you keep your leaves in an area where it's not going to be way too sunny. If you're going to keep your leaves in a spot where it's too sunny, this is what happens to your leaves. They shrivel up. A lot of people have trouble propagating by leaf, and they say, oh, my leaves just shrivel up, nothing, you know, I never grow, and I'm never able to grow babies. It's because when you pluck a leaf off, you put it in the sun, full sun, the leaf is not going to have the strength as a mother plant would have, and it's just a little leaf and it doesn't have roots or anything to protect it, so it's going to end up shriveling up and dying. See, this one I just pulled off, it brought some of the stem with it, and that's really good for the leaf. So if you pull off any stem, it has even extra, I don't know why it's good for them, but I've noticed that if I pull off like that with part of the stem, you end up having more success. So this one I've thrown in a few leaves to show you that if you leave them in full sun, they shrivel up. So what I do on this plant, since it gets lots of full sun, since this plant gets lots of full sun, when I pluck the leaf off, I have this little area right over here where I have my leaf propagation. Just throw it in there, leave it alone. Maybe you can water it, spritz it, and then as the weeks go on, you will start to see babies. So when you start to see babies, these are still too small, but I do have some in another pot where I've got some that are big enough, and they have been transplanted into a bigger pot. Some of them still have the mother leaf connected to them. You have to let mother leaf fall off, shrivel off on its own, and then you could put it into another pot, or you can just leave them like this, connected to mother leaf, and put it in a pot, and then eventually the mama leaf will shrivel up, dry, and fall off. Here's also an example of a beheaded plant. So this was beheaded. I cut it off like where I showed you, and I'm not going to use it for anything since it's a smaller plant from one of these larger plants that I have. It's a baby. So what I do is I just behead the baby, throw them in my propagation station, and just let it grow. Here's an example of the bigger leaves that I have, the bigger succulents I have propagated from leaf. So these guys are still pretty small, but most of them, the leaves have shriveled up and died. So there's still some you could see in here that still are connected to the leaf. I just throw it right on top of the soil and just let it continue to grow there. The bigger they grow, then you can pull them out and put them inside of a 2-inch pot individually. So these guys are still a little too small to do that with, but eventually when they get a little bit bigger, then I can pop them in here. Here's an example of some of the leaves that I've thrown into bigger pots. So you could see these leaves are just thrown on top of the dirt. I just toss them on top of the dirt, make sure the roots that are growing there are going to be touching the dirt. That way when you water, it gets water. But these are still connected to the mama leaf, so I just throw them in there, make sure the roots are touching the soil. That way when I water, they can drink. But look at this guy here. This guy is getting ready to detach from its mama leaf. This one is just at that point where anything will eventually get this leaf to break away from the baby. And it was still a juicy leaf like this one when I put them in here. But as the days are going on, mama leaf is starting to shrivel up, which means baby's going to be ready to be all on its own. And here's another example of a leaf that's almost about to detach from the baby, and another. So those you just leave on top of the dirt. Continue to just spritz. Oops, see how easy that was? The baby just popped off the mama leaf, and he's who knows where right now. Here he is. Here he is. See, this little guy's big enough to be detached from mama plant. So when they do detach from mama plant, that's when they're big enough so you could set them inside a 2-inch pot. So here's my 2-inch pot. I'm gonna grab that baby gently, because these guys are very, very soft, or very, very breakable. I don't know what the word would be. So I made a little hole, tossed the little guy in there, and then just kind of make sure you cover him up a little, the roots especially. And there he is. He's kind of tiny right now, but since you put him in a bigger pot, or since I potted him into a bigger pot, as the time goes on, depending on the size of the pot, the succulent will begin to grow. The bigger the pot, the bigger the succulent. Here's an example of a mother plant that has baby plants shooting off the side. So a lot of times people are wondering, oh, I have baby plants growing. How do I detach them from the mother plant? So what you do have to do is wait for baby plant to be large enough to detach from mother plant. This is kind of going to be an example of a beheading of a succulent, like the ones that I showed. So when baby is big enough, right now it's not big enough, but when baby is big enough, you're just going to go ahead and cut it pretty low to where the dirt is. Cut it right about there, and you're going to have this baby without being attached to the mama plant, and you're going to go ahead and add them into a little 2-inch pot. So put them into a little 2-inch pot, cover them up like I just showed you with the other baby, and you're going to have a new pup, a new plant from the mother plant. Eventually, when the baby grows enough, it'll start to get as big as mom and start to give you babies. This one is also an example of mother plant with babies. Let me move this guy out of the way here. All right. So here we have an aeonium. I believe this is mother plant right here, since she's the tallest of them all. And these are babies. So aeoniums, you cannot propagate by plucking off a leaf. If a leaf falls off, a leaf is going to fall off, and it's going to do this. You're never going to get a leaf propagation off of an aeonium. Only in very rare occasions have I ever had a leaf propped off of an aeonium and actually grown a baby from it. Very rarely that will happen. But see, here's mother plant, and the way she propagates is by pushing babies off on her stems. So she's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this tiny little one 7. She's got 7 babies growing off of her. Aeoniums are summer dormant, so they begin to look like they're gonna die with all these leaves that are falling. It's just because they grow during the winter. So during the winter would be a good time to propagate your aeonium plant. So this one's got tons of babies. During winter time, what I could do is cut a baby off, put this little guy in a 2-inch pot or maybe a 4-inch pot. So cut him off right about there. Put this guy somewhere else into another pot. And then sometimes you will get babies growing off of stems when you cut an aeonium pup off. You'll get babies growing along the stems. Here's an example of the babies growing off of the stem of an aeonium. So here you can tell I cut off mama plant. So I cut off mama plant, and around the edge of the mama plant there's all these little tiny baby aeoniums growing. And these guys will grow more during winter. So if you do end up beheading an aeonium during the summer, don't be scared if you cut a mother plant off and plant it and there's no roots growing, because these guys will grow the roots faster in the winter. In the summer, they become summer dormant, which means they don't need as much water, they don't need as much food, because they don't grow as much because they're supposedly sleeping, they're hibernating during the summer, and that's how they protect themselves from the summer heat. Look at this mama plant. She's got lots of pups on there. So during the summer, when I do propagate these off so I can put them in arrangements, I cut them off, and with enough stem, maybe like right about right here. And then during the winter time, I noticed that the little stem that I cut will start to prop lots of little babies out of it. So this is my tree garden here of succulents. This is where I have a memorial plaque for my son. It's right there. I'll show you the picture of it when we go to that side. But I have lots of succulents planted here. Here's an example of pups growing from a mother plant when I cut the mother plant off. So there was a mama plant in the middle. I chopped her off, set her down on the side, and where you chopped it off, it's pushing out lots of pups. When you see pups growing from the stem of a mother plant, it's usually a good idea to chop mom off instead of chopping the babies off, because the babies still need that extra care from the mother plant. Sometimes if you cut the babies off too small, they end up shriveling up and dying because they can't handle it. So what I like to do is, if I see a mother plant growing pups, I cut the mother plant off, set her down. She eventually will begin to grow roots, but then you'll notice that these pup plants will start to grow a lot faster. Mother plant takes up a lot of energy growing, so that's why pups grow so slow when mother plant is connected. But if you take mother plant off, you will begin to see that these pups will start to grow a lot faster. Look at these little guys, are about 1/4 the size of this mother plant, maybe 1/5. But look at them, they're so cute. They're about the size of the tip of my finger. Here's another example of a beheading that I did. So like I said, I use a lot of my succulents in my arrangements. So I beheaded mother plant for an arrangement a few months back, and look at this baby that grew from the stem. So you don't kill your succulents when you behead them. If you cut them in the right spot, you behead them and you grow more plants. So I like to go through, oh, look at this one. Beheaded mom, and you got 2 new babies growing on there. So what I like to do is I like to behead a lot of my plants during the springtime, maybe February, March, if it's starting to get a little warmer, I like to behead a lot of my plants. I go through and behead them all and then set the plants down wherever I'm going to set them. And then the stems will start to grow more babies. That's how I propagate from beheading. I usually do that during the springtime, because then it's not going to be too hot, and the pups growing from the stem won't shrivel up and die. But I normally do that every spring. I go through and I behead a lot of my plants that have stems, go through and behead them all, set them down, and then watch new babies grow. And that's how you can propagate and make more babies. If you want to grow your garden, you go through and behead all your plants, most of the ones that have a long enough stem, during the springtime when it's not too hot. When you cut them, and during the springtime is when they'll begin to grow and they won't burn. So this one I beheaded when it was a little too warm, and the baby growing, look at him, he fried. But the babies on the side that are getting more shade are doing pretty well. This is how sempervivums propagate. You cannot propagate these by leaves, by leaf cuttings either. These normally don't grow off of beheading either. These ones you propagate by leaving mama plant alone, and then eventually she'll begin to push all these babies out. Look at this. All these babies around her. Look at this. All down there. So when these guys get big enough, all you gotta do, this is all I do. When these guys get big enough, I think this one's big enough. Make sure I'm grabbing it from the correct spot. When they get big enough, all you gotta do is pop them out, just like that. You don't have to look where the stem is and go through and cut with a little clipper or anything. Just if they're big enough, just pull them straight out, just like I did. Pull them out, set them down somewhere. Let's see where this one could go. I got a little bit of a bald spot over here. So since this guy's big enough and he even has some roots to him, I'll just go by a spot where I don't have too many plants, set him down there. And since he is now disconnected from the mother plant and all the other babies that are taking his energy away, he will now begin to grow on his own, begin to get larger, and eventually start pushing babies out. Here I have an afterglow that receives full sun. I have a few of these for sale, but they're still not acclimated to the full sun. But this guy, look how shriveled, compact, I mean, you know, like this compact flower. Look how he looks because he gets full sun. These guys grow pups on the sides too. A little spider. So this one, when this pup gets big enough, I can go close to the stem, cut him off, and then plop him somewhere in this succulent fountain that I have. Here's another baby. I think that's all. I don't think I've seen any more. Yep, that's it. Here's some more. This is an aeonium also, and this one's shriveling up like this because once again aeoniums are summer dormant. All these succulents grow in different types of ways, so I have lots of babies growing here because I did throw some leaves in here. I just plopped off some leaves from these mother plants, threw them in there, and now look at all those babies growing. Once you start to get the hang of propagating by leaves, it's pretty simple. You learn to just not mess with them too much. You just plop them off, throw them somewhere where it's going to get shade, and then they'll begin to grow. The one thing I should say is that when you want to grow succulents by leaf cuttings, by leaf propagation, when you pop off the leaf, number one thing is clean break. Toss them somewhere where you're not going to worry that he's going to get burned. He's going to be somewhere a little shaded. He does need some sun, but just in a spot where he'll be okay if the sun's hitting here, because he'll get some sun, but not too much, because these other guys are going to be shading him. Throw him back there. Continue to water your plants as usual, and eventually you'll start to see that little guy grow. Lots of people have asked me, how do you know when your succulent needs water? Here's a great example. This plant, I water this about once a week. It does get a lot of hot afternoon sun, but look at this guy's leaves. You see how they're very wrinkly? This is what you call puckered. They're getting all puckered. They're thirsty. They need more water. This leaf is an example of a leaf, same plant, but this leaf still has enough water in it. But this is how a leaf would normally look if it's not in need of water. And this is the example of a leaf that needs more water. Succulents are a large percent of water. So these guys, even if you don't water them for a while, their leaves continue to hydrate them. They keep growing off of the water that's in their leaves. And when their leaves are starting to max out and they have drank all their water, this is what they look like. So a lot of people are scared and they say, oh, my succulent, I haven't watered it in 2 days. That's fine. If your succulent still looks like this after 2 days and it's not looking, the leaves aren't looking puckered, he still has enough water in his leaves to continue to drench and drink from them. Succulents don't need a lot of water for that reason. Their leaves are full of water and they continue to drink water from their leaves. Look at this pretty guy. This is a Vera Higgins. A lot of my plants have this white powdery stuff on them because I like to throw something called diatomaceous earth all over them once in a while to keep the bugs from growing on them. Look at this guy, he's got more babies growing because I beheaded the mama plant. And there's lots of little babies growing. 1, 2, 3. So since I took mama plant off, it doesn't matter. It looks a little ugly right now, but eventually I'll end up with 3 more plants on here. I started with 1, now I'm gonna have 3. Oh, maybe 4, there's another one, I think. Let's see. Oh no, that's just a regular leaf. I cut off 1 plant and now I'll end up with 3 more. So that's gonna be it with the succulent propagation video. If you have any questions, go ahead and message me. Go ahead and look through my Facebook pages and message me. I can answer your questions, whatever questions you may have. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Ooh, this got lots of leaves that I can propagate. Can't wait to start some new babies off of this one. Bye.